Sorry if you can't tell, the two of us are kind of old. Got some gray hairs going on. So we've been around for a while. So the first question is, what did the video game industry look like when we started working in it? Because it's kind of evolved over the years. So.
Yeah, so I actually kind of started a little bit later in my career. I started off as a college professor, and during that time you have to go around and you have to go to job talks and things like that. And so I was job talking, and I was working part-time at a game company at the time, and it was so much fun. I said, you know, forget the other career, I'm just going to go over to the game industry. So I decided to work for there. So, you know, when I started, you know, we're still sort of living in a retail world where, you know, consoles pretty much dominated the space. You also have PC gaming. But if you think, you know, when I think back to my childhood, you know, we really had a case where gaming has been kind of moving in concentric circles. At least that's the way I look at it. So you used to start off with, you know, video games used to be so darn expensive that basically you had to rent it for a quarter. And because, you know, an arcade machine would cost $10,000, so you'd go to a place called an arcade, where of course they bought a bunch of these machines, and I rented for 25 cents. And that's sort of where I, you know, started from. And, you know, bit by bit, then we started to have home consoles, which were affordable. We had PC gaming. Then we kind of moved, and now we're moving into this new world where we're seeing a lot of different patterns. And I think that's what's so exciting about it. But if you think about it, you know, I don't think it's all that different from the world we live in now. It's just that it's one of those platforms that's constantly evolving, and great. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's one of those things that's constantly evolving, and so, you know, we think about it as being, you know, when we talk about thinking about the past, we think of it. It's not actually all that different. You know, it keeps changing and it keeps evolving. So what we're playing it on changes. And, you know, maybe the cost for the unit, I mean, used to a $10,000 arcade machine as opposed to, you know, a $500 console, as opposed to, you know, a smartphone that you already have for other reasons. We're really seeing how gaming is sort of evolving. And that's why I think we see bigger and bigger crowds playing. And that's why, you know, even the nature of games are changing.
Well spoken. Hi, I'm Eugene Jarvis, and we're the Video Games and Our Future, We're All Gamers panel here. And you probably already met these guys. Gerald Higa, producer at wargaming.net. Most recently worked on World of Tanks for the Xbox 360. He's also a complete anime maven, and a USC professor also. So.
Yeah, in a previous life.
Where's your, you should be wearing your professor outfit here, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve Bowler to my right, and Steve's creative director at Phosphor Games. I guess a Chicago studio, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his specialty is art and animation.
Mm-hmm. Well, now design, but...
design too, okay. And what's your latest title, Steve?
I was just saying it's called Warp, Warriors of the Red Planet. It's in limited beta right now, like limited regions on, like I said, on your phones and your tablets. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's, starting out the panel, we're going to take a glimpse at the past. And what did the video game industry look like when we began? Gerald?
Yeah, Daryl.
You already got it?
You started with that.
Okay. Okay. I don't know, to me it was like Pong and Pixels, and the coolest thing going was a game called Space Wars. And that really got me into, maybe it was Space War. It was singular, yeah. A super cool black and white vector game back in the 60s and 70s. And that just kind of sucked me into that space. Steve, I guess, did you already...
No, I didn't answer
Okay,
that.
go ahead, man. Do it.
I started in video games in 2001, and it was like right after all the traditional animation dried up in Chicago. And it was really like, I think it was probably the wrong time to get started in video games, because it was right when arcades had officially died. Like, I think that year, the year before, was when Midway transitioned. I used to work at Midway Games, sorry, to back up a little bit. You're familiar with Midway a little bit.
Yeah, there was, we had some great times there, and I guess we transitioned to Oblivion.
Yeah, right? So anyway, Eugene was a legend in the Midway office. You were gone long before I started there. And anyway, so when I started there, that was we were actually, I was hired to work on an arcade title, and the arcade part of it got canceled like the third week I was there, and they switched everything over to PS2 development at that point. So it was literally in that transition, and Midway had no idea what they were doing in the console market because they had previously farmed all their console work out to Acclaim and stuff like that to do all the arcade ports. And it was a rough time, but a lot of fun. We had a good time, made some cool stuff. Anyway, so that's where I was when or the market was at when I started.
Cool, kind of always, I mean, it seems like a lot of times from disaster springs new beginnings, and it's amazing how your mind becomes focused when you no longer have a job or an income. Okay, let's move on. How has the video game industry evolved since we started?
Yeah, so I guess I was sort of starting on that whole
Okay.
concentric circles thing.
Okay.
And so the way I kind of view things is that we keep viewing a wider and wider audience for our games. So, you know, and sometimes I think that's threatening, especially with hardcore gamers. So, you know, we started off with the folks who spent all their time at their arcades. Then we kind of moved out to people who had their home consoles or PC gaming. And then that's sort of our hardcore game audience right now. And then all of a sudden mobile comes along, you know, where all of a sudden you can have any kind of game either on a web browser or on a smartphone and things like that. And I sometimes I feel like, you know, people who are in one part of this whole gaming, this growing circle, you know, concentric circle of gamers starts getting all worried about that. And I said, hey, no. We're widening the audience. We're expanding the types of gameplay. Yeah, you don't see an FPS, you know, maybe you don't see FPSs on a browser game, but there was a time when there were no FPSs. So, you know, there's a lot of innovation that happens in gameplay and all that other stuff. So sometimes when we see the industry change, which is definitely changing right now, I mean, you know, free-to-play model, sort of ubiquitous gaming. There's all these things that are coming around right now, and there's, you know, some people are like, well, you know, I just like old school arcade games, or I like old school console games. So that's not a problem. And you just have to think that this is kind of this ever growing circle where, okay, it's a little awkward when my parents call me in the middle of a meeting to say, oh my God, I got my Wii, which was a big shocker for me, that kind of transition. But I think because of that, you know, we're just seeing the market open up to more and more possibilities in terms of looking at different ways to make games and to make games fun.
Yeah, I guess from my impression, starting out in the 70s with the black and white games like Pong and Breakout and Space Invaders, and you look at it, it seems like year to year the games seem the same. It's like we always complain about there's too many sequels, there's too many clones, you know, it's the same old. But then you look over a span of decades, and I mean, we've gone from black and white games with a couple of pixels to, you know, photorealistic, you know, MMOs with millions of people playing, sometimes simultaneously. I mean, it's, the progress has been earth-shattering, and I think we've seen really a supernova of innovation, and it's really nothing short of the invention of an entirely new interactive art form in my mind. It's completely as legitimate as cinema or any other art form today. And I guess we're threatening to take over everything. Steve, what's your thoughts on this?
So, yeah, personally, it's like I've kind of worked on a lot of different stuff. I mean, obviously not an arcade cabinet, and so I started with console, and I worked on PC stuff, and the direction is kind of like anybody's guess, I guess, is where it's going. The craziest thing to me is that we can game on our phones now, and a lot of people will maybe shrug that off and be like, yeah, but it's not really gaming. And it's hard to say that when you've got, excuse me, things that are, you know, like one of the guys who created Halo, right, now has, what, Midnight Star or whatever is the game he just released, you know, on iOS, right, on your phone, on your iPhones and on your iPads. So you've got games like Candy Crush Saga and, why can't I think of the other one now? Of course, when I'm on stage, Clash of Clans, and even the Kim Kardashian game. Say what you will, say Say what you will, but any one of those games makes more money than any one of the games that any one of us, in fact, if you took all the games we have all worked on together, any one of those games makes more money in maybe a month than any of those games have combined, except for Wargaming, because that game makes mad, mad money. So, I mean, we're talking like $1 million a day, like more money than World of Warcraft at its peak, like more money than any other game out there on console, AAA, Grand Theft Auto, Halo, anything. These things are making insane amounts of money. Now that's not validation, but when you talk to people who you would have previously considered are not gamers, and that term now means almost nothing. Like I've got, like my daughter's friends' moms will be like, I'm a gamer too, here's my Clash of Clans game, and I'm or my Bejeweled game or whatever, and I'm on level 45, and they love it, they're all playing it. So it's really like more than anything, the phones have helped spread it like as wide as it can possibly go.
Yeah, I think that kind of comes back to this concentric circles that Daryl was talking about. Let's kind of riff on this thing a little bit with this free-to-play, and some people call it pay-to-win. How does this affect the industry? You know, and it kind of, to me, it calls into question, what is a game? You know, is a game just something that makes money? You know, is that anything that makes money as a game? Is it a virtual shopping mall? And then the question that comes to my mind is, are we as gamers being gamed by free-to-play? Daryl?
Yeah, so being one of the resident free-to-play people here, I guess, my company actually goes with, they have this sort of ideal or goal that we shoot for, which is the idea of, basically free-to-win. And it sounds like a marketing gimmick and everything else, but we genuinely look at our game design and try to take that into account when we're designing a game. And the whole point is, games are meant to be a challenge, right? If there's just a win button, this is why I don't like certain categories of games. I won't name the name, balls of growing vegetables and things. But, like these games where you just hit the win button and you win, and you're like, wow, that's great. I mean, there's no challenge to that, right?
Isn't it all about winning, though?
Well, it's not necessarily about winning, but the challenge, right? There's a challenge involved.
It's the journey, not the destination.
Right. I think it's sort of that challenge. And so what we try to do in all of our games is that you can basically win at the game without spending a dime. And the whole reason behind all of that is, and the reason why you have a free-to-play game in the first place is, people pay what they want for their gaming experience. Now, some people are not going to pay anything, and some people want to pay a lot. I mean, you run into this all the time. When you had subscription-based games, the problem with that model was, you had a hardcore World of Warcraft player that wanted to spend more than, $15 a month or $20 a month. They wanted to spend $100 a month, or they wanted to spend $150 a month. What could they do? They could multi-account, they could buy gold, there's lots of things, but those were kind of circumventing the way the game was designed. So the way free-to-play kind of approaches this is, you pay what you want. You play the game, you're not interested in this game, or you're not committed to it enough to spend anything. That's fine. You play the game with people who are. And usually the people who do spend money in the game are playing for accelerants. So basically there are things where they can't be on the game 12 hours a day to master it. So what they do, they pay so that you get a 1.5 times experience bonus. So now I can play 6 hours and be competitive with people who are playing like 9, 12 hours a day. And that's sort of the approach that we take at least. And I think that the best part about it is that for every, like some people just can't afford to pay for games, or some people just at that given moment can't really commit to a game. You can try a game and decide if you like it or not. I mean, to be honest, you probably wouldn't spend on a game like World of Tanks until you played it for a while, because there's no need in the beginning, because you're just trying to learn the mechanics of the game and everything else. And then once you sort of determine how you're going to play the game, what kind of time commitment you're going to make to the game, then you make a decision. And I think it's not for every game. I think there's still a lot to be said for, I'm just going to plunk down my $60 and bring home a console game. That's a complete experience, and I'm not worried about, am I going to be paying more down the road? But on the other hand, if it's free, you can try it. You don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and certainly the free-to-play has really opened up a wide audience, probably the widest audience ever we've seen for gaming. But yeah, I guess one thing is, does it sort of box in your genre? You know, there's a certain kind of genre that works with free-to-play. Does that kind of stifle other forms of gaming because they don't monetize? You know, it seems like, is it about monetizing or is it about having fun playing a game? Steve?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because there's actually a lot of boxes that go into it. One of them is hardware, and by hardware I mean there's a couple of different examples. Like, you know, World of Tanks is PC. There's a lot of other PC free-to-play out there, like if you look at League of Legends. And what they do is they actually aim for the lowest common denominator of rig that can run those games. So they have to be performant on a really, really low-end PC. Because even the players who don't give you any money in a free-to-play game economy are super, super valuable to your company because they're taking up slots on your server, allowing other people to have a competitive and fun experience, right? So you want as many people flooding that server as possible.
So they're cannon fodder for the
no,
people
actually,
that buy
some of them are actually still really good.
Some of them are better than the players.
Yeah, some of them have been playing so long they're actually some of the best players. So you're not only wanting them to fill up the servers, but you also wind up with a lot of free-to-play games, you wind up with a low return rate, where maybe you're getting 2% of your player base who monetize, right? Who want to pay to keep the game alive. And while I hate talking about stuff like that in business terms, the reality is that we have to make money or you don't get games. So that's part of the problem.
But really, couldn't we have like starving art? I mean, how many musicians make any money? I mean, come on, you know, I mean, how many people are playing music here?
Right.
How many people play music? All right. How many people get paid playing music? Okay. So I mean, why can't we design games just for fun? Why do they all have to monetize, you know?
That's a really good question, because they're expensive to make. Just one song in a video game, if you want to license it, is usually a $20,000 license, to use music as your example. So we're paying the musician, right? And we have to make a return on that investment if it's a licensed song. So at any rate, so the other thing you have to look at is the market on top of the hardware, and sometimes the market is really resistant to premium or paid games, like the $64 game. For instance, the iOS market, we found, is really resistant to upfront payments, and we don't know why. It's a psychological thing. Like, the phone alone is worth $600, and the plan to use the phone every month is like a minimum of $45 a month. And they will be in line to buy a $5 coffee and complain that the game is 99 cents.
Yeah, isn't the problem like 99% of the games are crap and they aren't worth anything?
It very well could be. Yes, that could be it. So, but even the featured games, even if you get editor's choice, people are like, it's $7. I really don't want to pay that. And it's been vetted by Apple. They've said, we've awarded this editor's choice, so you know it's good, and they still don't want to do it, which is okay, fine. That's driven the free-to-play market, and that's why it's exploded, because now there's no risk to the consumer. The consumer can easily download it and try it before they decide if they want to buy it and throw any money at it, whether it's a skin, whether it's a consumable like the double XP thing, things like that. So the PC market is a really wild, open economy out there. Some people want the $64 game, some people want the indie $12 and $19 game, and then there's lots of people, as you found, who still want the free-to-play.
And that kind of brings us to this whole business of consoles, PC, mobile, even arcade games, if I can mention that. They still exist. Where is there a future for all these things, or are these things going to be dinosaurs in the museum, and we're just going to have a 9-inch iPhone eventually that will be everything? I mean, is there a future for consoles? Gerald?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. So, I actually, before I moved to Chicago, I was actually living in Tokyo. I was actually living specifically in Akihabara, which is sort of the game, anime, manga capital. And it's really an interesting phenomenon because there's 5 Sega centers there that are like 6 stories tall. and they're all filled with arcade games. So the interesting thing is arcade games are alive. Their audience is just a lot smaller. I mean, I think at the time, their audience was big relative to the size of the total gaming population. But when your total gaming population is everyone that owns a smartphone, of course, it looks like the arcade market is really small. And, you know, we still have consoles, you know, as an example, like our game is running on the 360. You know, there's already Xbox One out there, but you need a big enough install base for our kind of business model. So you can't jump necessarily straight onto the new platform because enough people have to have, you know, the platform running because to make the numbers work. But I think that what ends up happening is that, you know, you don't get rid of consoles. There's always going to be sort of a console audience. I love JRPGs and I want to sit down and waste 100 hours, you know, playing that game. And so I don't think that that's necessarily going to go away. But, you know, I think we're moving to an era where, you know, the smartphone has taught us that we want our gaming experience. We are so obsessed with entertainment. While we're waiting in line for entertainment, we want to be entertained, right? I mean, when you're waiting in a movie and you're sitting there playing a game and you think about that, that's like, wow, that's.
But doesn't it kind of say something about the game if the only time you want to play it is if you have nothing to do?
Yes, maybe. I think, well, I mean, you know, like, a lot of people kind of bag on a lot of these puzzle games and everything else, but I'm always reminded of like Puzzle Quest or something like that where, yes, you're playing a puzzle game and that puzzle game has really low entry, but because it has low entry, it's also low exit, right? It doesn't really hold your attention, but it can be part of a meta game that's a lot more interesting and persistent and kind of exciting. So yes and no. I mean, I think that's why you have these wider circles. I mean, you know, when you have like 200 million people playing your game, maybe they're not going to be so obsessed with a game that's going to, when they start the game, they have to dedicate a good 3 hours to play. But, you know, if it's 5 minutes, then they can. And then, so I think what it is that we have to look at this as a whole tier and spectrum of entertainment.
Yeah, I think you kind of look at the example of movies. You know, movies came out, and then, wow, that was really cool, and you had to go out to see the movie, and then TV came, and it was like, well, who wants to go to a movie? I can just watch stuff at home. But we still go to movies. I mean, it's, you know, it's 6 years later, and we're still going to movies. And now we have, you know, internet, we have YouTube, we have Netflix, we have video on demand, and yet we still, sometimes, you know, Sunday night, you know, Game of Thrones is happening, and you gotta see it, you know, and so we still have TV. So it's interesting, it seems like things just, it is like this concentric circles where things just keep expanding, and the old things keep going. I mean, hell, I was listening to radio today. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Let's talk about esports and how that's going to affect the future of games. You know, I think esports is pretty cool. The only thing I don't like about it is like you're watching some guy play around with a mouse and a keyboard. You know, and I mean, it's much more fun to walk around the lobby here at Wizard World, and you know, you see a lot more action there. But I guess it's, you know, it's a super cool phenomenon. People are really into it, and I just think it could be more of a theatrical experience than watching a guy, you know, play around with his keyboard. Steve, what do you think about esports?
There's certain ones that I actually enjoy watching matches of, like fighting games. I think are really interesting because it's kind of like a cerebral 1 versus 1, like really fast, you know. And just recently, you know, because we're making a MOBA, we started, well, a lot of guys at the office are really into Dota. And so I'm kind of forced to get into watching the International now. And, you know, that's, does everyone know what the International is here? How many people play, like, a MOBA? How many people play League or Dota? Or one of the other ones, right? So that's almost half the audience. So we got into watching the International and watch all these international teams playing Dota. And now I kind of understand I'll say kind of understand, because you can play like Dota for 1,000 hours and you still don't understand. And I kind of understand the meta behind all of those game mechanics. And so watching those teams play, it was interesting watching how they would play one round and then either they would or they wouldn't change their strategy based on whether they won or lost the round. And I think the finals was, the problem was they the winning team used a better ball of death mechanic than the other team, and the other team that was losing kept insisting that their losing strategy would work the next round, and they went for it 3 rounds in a row, and that was it. Like, so it was, like, already that's sports commentary, right? So it's like, I love watching football, so when I watch these guys play, it's not a physical effort, but it's that cerebral effort on the same level, so it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's like mental combat, and I mean, the cool thing is it you know, opens up sports. You don't have to be, you know, 6'10" and, you know, be able to stuff, you know. It opens it up to anyone, and I mean, just the whole team thing and the live thing about it, you know. So for so long, gamers, we were stuck on the internet, you know, just in chat rooms, talking to one another, and it was kind of a sterile experience. But now it's live, it's in the stadium. You know, we have crowds, we have teams. I mean, it's an amazing phenomenon. Gerald, where do you think this thing is going to go? Is it a fad, or is it going to be is it going to blow out NBA and NFL?
I think it's one of those things where we, you know, like as a gamer, we are very much, you know, inherently gaming is interactive, right? We're the ones playing, but there's a certain entertainment value to sort of watching someone else play. You know, I used to think, wow, it's really strange to think of a 24-hour StarCraft channel watching someone else play StarCraft. But then, you know, you start watching things like Sword Art Online, for those who might be familiar with some anime stuff, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait, it's actually kind of interesting to watch, you know, like, even if that's just a fictional account, to watch someone else playing a game. And so you can kind of see where that appeal comes from. And I think the competitive nature, I think the only thing to me about esports is that, you know, the reason why sports kind of work the way they do is that rules are very standardized, these leagues and everything else. And in computer gaming, that we have the same, but the games themselves are still changing so fast. It's kind of like, I don't know if we have a steady kind of platform which you can really build on, you know, something where 10 years down the line you're playing the same game, because 10 years from now you'll probably be playing a totally different version. It might be the same game in name, but certainly not in terms of rules or mechanics.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I guess another thing that's kind of blown up in the last couple of years, although it's been brewing from back in the late 80s and early 90s. Anybody remember Jared Lanier? He was the pioneer of VR games and virtual reality, and now, I guess about 25 years later, I guess everybody's heard of Palmer Luckey and the Oculus Rift. So the time seems to be happening, and Steve, what do you think of Oculus and other VR interfaces? I know Sony has a new one. I mean, is this gonna change gaming, or is it just like 3D TV? Is it gonna be a flash in the pan?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I hate being wrong, so I totally take a leg on both sides of the fence on this issue. Because, like, you know, growing up in gaming and then, you know, working in gaming, like, I learned that peripherals are murder, they're death. Like, don't make a peripheral, don't bet on a peripheral. Oculus Rift is a peripheral. Like, it's an expensive peripheral too. It's like, what, $200-300, I think, and a waiting list to get one. So, as a developer, I don't want to bet on Oculus Rift, but as a consumer, it's really rad.
Are you going to access your Facebook with the Oculus Rift?
No, I'm sure that was just a diversification thing. I don't think Facebook really thinks it's going to be that tied into it. But, you know, we only have a DK1 at the office, and our DK2 is, you know, it'll get here when it's our turn in line to get it. It's amazing. It's really cool to see what people are making on it. But, you know, when you think about, there's only, what, 25,000 DK2s in the wild, if that, that's a really small user base for me to sell anything to. So right now it's sort of like this bohemian artist community, and I don't know if you guys have seen, I'm gonna blow it, is it Red Paw, the guy who does all the Studio Ghibli stuff? Have you guys seen any of this stuff? Does anybody out here have an OR kit? Does anybody here have an Oculus Rift? 1, 2, 3 guys, 3? Yeah, so it's a hard sell. Like, if I could get 100% sales through in this audience, I could have $60. That's not a lot of money. That's
more than most developers making these days.
Yeah, but it's a hard sell. It's an amazing product. I want to see it explode, but like for businesses to really make anything out of it, like 1 million of them have to be in the wild. So.
Yeah, I mean that's a deal. But how about Google Glass? I think there's more of those out there. Do you think augmented reality is going to be it, or is it, you know, you certainly don't have to worry about tripping over your feet and falling over and stuff. I mean,
Yeah, I'm sorry I gotta keep bringing in anime, but you know, like sort of talking about sword art, then you talk about Excel World, where it's basically augmented reality gaming and things like that. I've been an advocate for this for a really long time, but I don't know when we're going to reach that critical mass. I think that's the important thing. Something has to catch people's imagination so there's a wide adoption of it. Because, I mean, you know, we've thought about different things. You said, oh, you know, what if you basically play a location-based, you know, like one of the projects that I used to always throw around is just to get people sort of stimulated and thinking about this is imagine we're tying in location-based gaming, so all of a sudden, like, I decide that I'm going to take over this Starbucks. So I send 5,000 troops to defend this Starbucks, and then someone else comes along and says, well, I'm going to, you know, instead of being a mayor or something like that just by showing up, you're going to actually have some game plan. Okay, well, I'm going to send a catapult and, you know, 50,000 archers against your guy at Starbucks, and I'm going to take over Starbucks, and things like that. I mean, it's great, and it sounds like a lot of fun, but it's hard to get that kind of density for people to actually enjoy that, because, I mean, think about how many people in the city would have to be playing the game for you to even run across another location. I think that's why we see a lot of this, you know, they start talking about it, like Sony starts talking about it, things, because they have their experience in Tokyo, where, you know, you could conceivably imagine enough of a critical mass to have this kind of augmented reality gaming. But if it's just something where all of a sudden you're sitting in a meeting and then you get a warning notice that you're getting attacked, I don't think that's enough. I think it truly has to be augmented reality. It has to be part of the world you're living in, and that's going to require massive adoption, I think.
Okay, we're going to wrap this thing up and get some questions here. I have one last question, basically for the panel here. Where do you think games are going to go in the next 50 years? And part two, what is your ultimate futuristic game? Steve?
I don't know. If I did know, I wouldn't tell you because I'd want to be the guy who disrupts the industry and, you know, has his toy out there first.
You're always about monetizing, aren't you?
No, it's just my hat's like in every ring with PC and phone gaming, and, you know, like in the last 3 years I've shipped a Wii U title, a PC title, and 3 iPhone games, 4? I don't even remember, and a Kinect game. I'm sorry, we work really fast. There's a lot of stuff going on. So like, I don't know, I just think they're all cool stuff. Like, I like console games, I like phone games, I like my PC games, whoever comes up with a hot thing, I'm sure I'll buy into it, so.
Gerald, where's the industry going, and what's going to be your killer app to get this installed base of Oculus going?
Yeah, I think the only thing I can think of, and like I said, to just get really big adoption, is to imagine a game, and this is a real theoretical abstract concept, but to imagine a game where you're always playing. So I'm not trying to sort of go down the whole shell route of gamification of everything, of your daily life, but I can imagine a game where, you know, like I'm on my smartphone and I can still engage in the game, and if I'm sitting at home in front of my TV, I'm still engaged in the game, and if I'm on my PC, I'm still engaged in the game. A persistent world, and maybe when you're on these different appliances, you're not necessarily playing the exact same game, but you're part of the same world, or you have the same character or something like that. I could see something like that working, because I think that's the thing. We're living in a world now where we've got so many different platforms to play on. And I think the one disappointment for me is that I can't link all those experiences together, because they're different.
Yeah, well, that's a huge challenge because of the different interfaces and everything. So I guess I'll just say my dream game would be a first-person shooter, Oculus VR, with tactile feedback, so you could like have any environment you wanted, and also pain. I think that may be interesting. Okay, let's throw it open to questions here. Right here.
They got a microphone.
Oh, they got a mic. Okay, the mic's back there. Yeah, everybody, there's the mic.